How's it going?
I'm well. I hope everybody in the audience is well. I'm going to change the presenter controls to you.
Very cool. Then I'll go ahead and share my screen really quick and bring this up.
There we go.
And
Looks good.
you should see everything just fine. Very cool.
Yep.
Hi, everybody. Just wanted to take this time. We've got about an hour to talk about how we can leverage cloud-based technologies to help increase your overall team productivity within your library, as well as we'll dive into how to interact with people outside of the library as well, utilizing some of these tools. We'll focus a lot of attention around tools such as Slack and other online collaboration tools of that nature. There's a lot of different options out there, so we'll dive into those options as well. I know Louise introduced me. Here's a little bit about my background. Take a few minutes. You'll also be able to get a copy of the presentation as well. Got a huge background based in both education as well as technology, and have been successful, very successful at kind of melding the two together and building new innovative solutions to common problems, along with kind of piloting these in my own environment where I lead a support center that manages support for over 40 colleges and universities that are spread across the globe. So if we dive into leveraging cloud-based technologies to help increase your team's productivity, you really think about all the various things and all the various tasks that we're juggling on a day-to-day basis. And with that, you want to have something to manage that. If you're like me, you've probably looked at your inbox every day and say, I've gotten an insane amount of emails just in this morning alone. And then sometimes when you miss a day or two of work, you dread actually going back, not because you don't like going to work, more so because you're scared to double click on the inbox icon and find out how many emails you may have missed and how much of the communication flow has kind of gotten, I guess, bottlenecked because you haven't been in the office. So with leveraging these cloud-based technologies, we're going to actually give people more insight and more ability and kind of empower your team to work better together without making someone's inbox or something as that kind of central point of failure. So on the agenda for today, we're going to talk about tools, just the various tools that we can possibly use. We're going to have a talk about how to use those tools to increase productivity. We'll talk about how this new tool set will help increase cross-team collaboration. What I've personally seen in my implementation of this is that we've been able to kind of pull teams together that we haven't had working together in the past. When you look at it in a technology industry, if you ever dive into, hey, I'm having problems with my computer, it's not uncommon to have the network admin point to the software guy and the software guy point to this other guy, and no one actually, really says what the actual problem is. So we're going to show how we can leverage this tools to get those teams to actually work together. We're going to keep things more organized. Also, how to be able to get people on board. Obviously, this is such a huge culture change that it can really require a lot of extra effort to get people on board. But the benefit is at the end of the day, things are going to be a lot better. And then lastly, we'll talk about integrations and how we can expand. We will implement this new functionality in our workplace, but then also expand further along the way. So if I pause for a second, kind of want to see, I guess, a show of your digital hands on right now, who uses just social media in general, and what are you using it for? If you can expand upon it in terms of you're just using it with general communication with your friends, are you just going out there to kind of catch up on the news, or is anybody here using it for work or any kind of work activities? I know if we talk about it in the past, 10 years ago, using social media for anything, especially if you used it at work, was very passé, and in some instances there's plenty of examples where people were getting in trouble for using social media. Then we've moved a little further and started using other technologies to help kind of bridge those gaps, and social media is one of those. I commonly use this in my classroom environment when I was teaching courses to kind of take the class outside of the classroom, if you can imagine it in that manner. So I've seen a few hands where people are using these different technologies, which is great. If you, in the question and answer section while we go through here, if you want to maybe share what you're using these for, if it's for talking to friends or news, that's great. Feel free to keep that communication flowing in the question section. So I look at it this way, this new set of tools that are really heavily becoming extremely popular in the just the industry of business and tech and all these other areas is a set of cloud collaboration tools. And I put in brackets social because they're really an adaptation of social media tools to be able to work and be more focused on productivity in the workplace and being able to build more of a social aspect within your workplace. So with these new set of enterprise tools, what's going to happen, and obviously with cloud in general, typically cloud and the reference of cloud means that the data that you house on these and the communication that's occurring is going to be stored offsite at another location. But there are specific implementations of these tools that you can house locally. It just depends on whether or not you worry about that. So the tools specifically that we're talking about are really aimed towards just rampant disorganization. And it may mean that you're organized yourself and things go well, but at the same time, I look at it this way, in general, there's a lot of people that are around you that may not be as organized with their digital content, and in myself, I guess, as an example, is my email inbox. I get probably 200 emails on a daily basis. If I miss a week, it takes me about a full work day to catch up on all my emails that I miss, which makes it horrible for me. And you probably have very similar experiences with not only that, but other things that are going on. So we're going to use these tools to help kind of fix that disorganization. At the same time, I know in my workplace and in almost every workplace I've ever been at, there's always a lack of collaboration. There's always that one person that wants to say, hey, knowledge is power. I have all the knowledge, so I should have all the power. And in today's workforce, a lot of people, it's all about collaborating with individuals. Not that one person has all the knowledge, but that all of us together have a better knowledge to be able to deliver. With the inability to communicate in real time, so right now, if you wanted to reach out to somebody that is on vacation, you're going to have to send them an email. And there may be other people that can help facilitate the answer to that question, but you may not know that. And if you just send that person an email, and if they don't have their emails checked by the other person, you're going to wait until they get back. But when you have a set of cloud collaboration tools, as we dive into this really deep, is that you can post a message and that person can either get a notification on their phone while they're outside of work and maybe they're checking that, but in the instance they're not, you have a set of tools that everybody can access. So with those tools, like I said, there's just an insane amount. We've got documentation creation tools that are from Google Apps, Office 365, Sandstorm Oasis, Open 365, Zoho. A lot of these you've probably already used, Google Apps and so forth. At the same time, you've got your file sharing tools where you have SugarSync, Drop Canvas, WeTransfer, DropSend, SendSpace, Box.net, Google Drive, OneDrive, just a ton of different tools that you can use to share applications and files. And then lastly, you've got various types of communication tools, and there's a lot of them out there. One of those is Slack, another is Yammer, Google Docs, Skype, and so forth. those level of communication tools continue to expand, and in 2017 are becoming extremely extremely focused on by the larger companies. In the past, it was these small companies that created the tools, so you've got all these weird names out here that you may not have heard of before. But products like Link and Google Docs and so forth, those are some of the names that you may have familiarity with. Well, Google and Microsoft specifically in the last month have even upgraded their ability to compete with tools like Slack and all these smaller companies, because now they're seeing such a market share for this new technology. So if I pause and ask a quick question, has anyone used any type of cloud-based tool, very similar to the ones that we just listed on the previous slide? And I'll go back to the other slide just so you have an idea of what ones are out there. If those are ones that you've used, awesome. Feel free to share what one you might have used in the questions section. But there's a ton out there, and I even see a bunch of hands already being raised that everybody is using these tools. Now, if we focus specifically towards, has anyone used Slack or Glip or one of those types of tools? I start to see the hands starting to disappear really quickly. I think Amy G is the only one right now, and that hand just disappeared too, so that may not have had anybody use the Slack program. All right, I see a few. I've got a couple that are Jan, Nicole, that have used Slack. So very cool. So we'll dive into those right now. So the main purpose of those tools is really, and hopefully you've used these before, for one, for giving presentations, because you have the ability to use these tools very similar to GoToWebinar right now to present various materials. You've also got project management, where you can do your collaboration on projects within the tools. The biggest thing that I personally like, and what drove me to move in this direction, was historical and searchable communication. So on a day-to-day basis, the team I run would stand up a one-time chat session, and that chat session would run throughout the day, and it was basically for tracking any kind of activity that may be going on in the environment on a day-to-day basis. So if a server goes down at I support Notre Dame, so at Notre Dame the server goes down, we want to know if that student is actually getting their issue resolved, as well as find out if there is a server down, that not just one person knows about the server, that the entire team knows about the server. There's a lot of other communication that goes on a daily basis, but at the end of a shift, that session restarts and you lose all that historical information. It's the nature of common chat programs, very similar to GoToWebinar right now. All this stuff that you're typing right now, once this session ends, you can't respond to it, and in some instances you can't even get access to it. So what these new sets of tools do is allow you to continue that conversation even afterwards. So if you miss a day, you can come back and check in what happened on Tuesday, because I was off on Tuesday. It's good for document management. We use this as a way to keep our documents organized and also share those files with the team. And then also knowledge sharing. We actually have a wiki that's integrated with our Slack integration that allows you to search the wiki through Slack and then bring back the results into Slack. So you can actually, if you do it in a specific channel, and as we get into the channels, you can search these items and it'll feed back that knowledge to the channel, so not only you are learning, but the rest of the team is learning as well. So we talked all about the categories earlier. This is my top list of ones that fit into those categories. So for presentations, UB, Canva, and Murally, communication, Slack, HipChat, Glip, Bitrix, and so forth. Like you said, a lot of the people on here have already utilized these, which is really great. So if we dive into which one I should use, if we drill that list down even further, for file sharing, and the easiest ones to use are Google Drive and Dropbox. These are pretty standard for being popular. You've got your document management of Office 365. Presentations, typically Google Hangout gives a very nice interface for being able to run presentations, and a lot of these have no cost associated with them. Communication, Slack and MS Teams. Microsoft Teams is one of those new offerings that Microsoft is bringing out. Actually, I think it released earlier last week. So it's a direct competitor of Slack. And then for project management, Trello. As we dive into this a little more, you'll start to see these main communication platforms actually integrate with all these other tools. So if you want to share a file on Google Drive, you can put it on Google Drive, but it'll also post a link back to Slack to allow people to know there's a new file available. Project management, you manage your projects through Trello, but it keeps you on task by sending feeds or messages back to the people that are involved in that project via Slack. Google Hangouts, you can fire up a Google Hangout straight from Slack and Office 365. Specifically, Google Docs actually integrates a lot better with Slack, but then you have some other options here too. So we've talked about a lot of the different things on how Slack works or how those new cloud productivities work and what benefits we can gain from them. But really, how is it actually going to increase productivity? Because honestly, I talked about just a bunch of stuff right now. If we pause and we think of historically, what have you done in the past to help increase the productivity in your environment? And you can post your responses in the questions section, but at the same time, things that I've done in terms of trying to help productivity typically have fell around training and giving people more training so they're better educated on what they need to do to help build things or help get the job done. Other things that I've done personally to help kind of increase productivity is kind of evaluate a process, find out where there's problems in the process, and then make recommendations on how to improve the process. There's a lot of different ways you can go about it, but typically we never dive so far deep into the tools or the technology that we're using is to use that as an example of how we can actually move that process forward. So we can use tools to increase this productivity. What it's going to do is help increase your collaboration because there's a lot of side benefits to this. It's not only going to benefit increasing productivity, but it's also going to allow you to reap a lot of extra rewards. So you've got increasing your collaboration. It's going to help engage your team as well as vendors and even patrons of the library off-site via just mobile access and being able to have a platform that people can access at any point and any time. It's going to give you a running history of activity, which will be very good in terms of how you want to engage your team and their ownership for this environment. You're going to be able to build a better alternative to email. Right now, you could probably easily raise your hand and say how many times have you lost an email in the barrage of emails that come through your inbox, and it happens at least once a week where you've missed an email for the most part. Or you've ignored an email, and maybe that email was extremely important and needed your attention. With using these tools, it's going to help allow you to eliminate those issues. You're going to capture your non-email users. Today, especially on my team, I've noticed that there's a subset of the team that just prefer not to use email. And they're the people that have grown up on social media, and they look towards having a tool set that is more like social media. So these two bullet points, capture non-email users and having a social media-like tool set, goes hand in hand because one, adopting and understanding how to use the tool set is extremely easy, especially if you spend time on Facebook or Google Plus or any of the other various online and social media platforms. So being able to use a tool like this gains people's interest immediately. But at the same time, There's always those people that you send an email to and they never read your email, they never read emails. That's because they're not being engaged by an email. But when you implement a tool set such as this, you have better engagement for those individuals. And then you have the ability to integrate all those apps, all the ones that we showed a few slides back, into a central location where you can actually dive into everything. You can go between your main communication platform out to those applications and then send notifications back. It's going to keep you highly organized along the way. So those main communication platforms we keep talking about are Slack, Bittrex24, Glip, HipChat, and there's a ton of others that are going on right now. Yep, and feel free to use the question box if you have questions along the way. I like to keep my flow open so we can communicate two ways along the way through the presentation. So why is there poor document collaboration? What happens is people don't really understand that if we don't focus on this specific area and collaborating through these types of tool sets, just in general, and there was a poll by Whitehall, the Whitehall company, which is over in Europe, is losing 500 million euros in a year just because of poor collaboration. So there's a ton of benefit that we can gain out of all of this. So various interface types. So when I wanted to kind of give a quick view of what the types of interfaces are, you've got your Slack interface type, which if it looks very familiar to social media, that's because it is. It has a very similar flow to the way Facebook actually works. Functionality works very similar to Twitter, so if you want to, and Facebook, so you can like things, you can add emojis to specific icons or announcements. You can share files on the right side of the screen and have your file view there. You have a bunch of channels or rooms, so it's almost reminiscent of American Online, if you remember those days back when you could have special rooms to get into. And you can reference those rooms and send messages to everybody in those rooms. And then you have your direct message chats, where you can message individuals directly if you need to keep a private conversation. So we're not getting rid of all of that. And I'll scan through with HipChat. You can see it's very similar, very, very similar layout. Glip, the same way. Bittrex24, the same way. The thing is, when you look at this, they all have a very common flow. They look identical, and the reason why they look identical is because this is really based off of the technology that Facebook has really put into play, as well as Twitter. So you'll see a lot of easy to adopt methodologies here. Many use channels to communicate. So as we talked about, if I go back to the slide before, we have a section that is called channels. So you've got your work groups, your extranet work groups. Bittrex24 is even more so using a business-based type of verbiage. But if we get into HipChat here, you can see where you can break out into individual rooms. You can join those rooms, or you don't have to join those rooms. So there's a lot of ability that you can use the environment for which works best for you, knowing that you don't have to participate in the entire environment. They all employ Twitter-like features, so if you want to do a hashtag or you want to do an @somebody, you can do that, especially if you do a @somebody, that will get their attention, because if they've got the desktop app or the mobile app or something like that, when you @somebody, it's basically like sending them a text message. They're getting a, hey you, there's an important message for you. Come take a look at it. And Noreen has a great question. Never used any of these. Is there one that's easier than the others for beginners? And my quick answer is yes. I would personally go with Slack. Slack is an extremely easy one to download, install, and get up and running. You can go to slack.com. They make the process extremely easy to set up an instance and then from there you can start using it. As you use some of these tools, you'll find that some are free. Slack has a free version that keeps up to 10,000 messages available for you. If you start to go over that, then you will either lose those messages or you'll have to pay for additional or pay for more access and start paying per user, so then you can receive all of the messages. With HipChat is a one that'll cost you very similar structure to Slack. Glip, when it first came out, was totally free. You could get access to almost everything, and it would have unlimited chat history. They start to modify their cost structure, so there's going to be a little bit of cost change, and it's a little bit harder to get into these others. So to keep it short and sweet, I would personally recommend using Slack as one to get you started, and then from there start playing with the others if you don't really like some of the features in Slack. But as I've shown, most of them have almost the exact features. They just like to custom tailor them to their own name. Microsoft has one that's coming out. Google has one that they just announced like a day or two ago that they're going to be revamping Google Apps to make it more social based. And I think we went through all of this. The biggest thing I always love is being able to maintain a searchable history, because that's going to allow you to kind of get an idea of what's going on in your workplace. Another great thing about a new set of tools that are hosted in the cloud is the accessibility. Now, we think of cloud as being ensuring your data is secure, or at least that it doesn't warrant worrying about crashing, or it's safe. But another great benefit of having things hosted in the cloud is their accessibility. When you have a tool like Slack, Slack's actually hosted on Amazon Web Services. Sad thing, it actually went down a couple weeks ago, but it was due to some issues with Amazon. You've probably all heard about it in the news. When you have a tool that's hosted on a service like that, very, very infrequently do you have any issues that things are going to go down. So Lori has a great option here where they're looking for the ability to have the community be able to communicate back to the library via their website. So this works really well for that. You don't have to be a specific registered user. In my mind, what you would want to do, Lori, and for those that are interested, is use a tool very similar to Glip and have one that allows self-registering and allows you to invite other people to it, and it doesn't pay per seat. If you can get that, and Glip typically has that, Slack has it at a limited level if you start to lose messages after 10,000 messages. But now you can have your community participate in this tool. The way you would want to link it from your website is just put like a login to this thing, to Slack or to Glip on your website, and it would be able to transition them over to that new location, and now you can start doing your communication there. But there are some other open source options if you happen to host your library website internally and don't want to use a cloud option. There's some cloud options that are available, just needs a little additional research to be able to find those. The good thing is with your community, when you have a tool such as this, they'll be able to integrate it with their mobile devices, their web browser, their smart TV. It's accessible on everything. So you're not only going to hit all your community, but you're also going to be able to hit all your coworkers. And the biggest thing is being able to try to interconnect libraries as well and be able to share their information across multiple libraries to kind of help expand your reach. So if we pause for a second, who finds themselves checking into the library when you're really not supposed to be? Or let's say on your off hours, you're at home, it's 8 o'clock at night. Do you ever log in and check your email, check any of the library systems, or do any of that? Agreed, there's just hands popping up everywhere. It's the new mentality. It's almost built into your nature now, because we multitask and information is so much more accessible nowadays, is that we crave that on a almost a subliminal level to be able to dive into that information. So with this new set of tools, you're going to be able to, unfortunately, feed that addiction even further, but at the same time, try to keep it confined to only needing one set of tools on your actual device. So what we've found is we've used this to help build and leverage more of a greater cross-collaboration between teams. Like I said when I referenced earlier in the program, is that we talked about how before we used these tools you had a lot of finger pointing. And I can reference the image on the screen right now. You know, we were pinning the blame on the donkey. But when we moved to Slack, it helped increase our team's collaboration and then helps ultimately build stronger libraries, because now you've got specific sections and you may not interact with everybody in the library on a daily basis depending on the size of your library. Well, this is going to allow you to do that, because now you can get messages to people in a more meaningful way and be able to communicate with them when you may not be able to actually physically communicate with them. I've personally found that we've been able to take our server team and our network team and our application development team along with the help desk team and be able to integrate those so tightly that now people that would normally not check in at work are checking in at work on a daily basis. Now that can be seen as a good thing, it can be seen as a bad thing, but we try to build a culture that it's not forced, that it's purely accepted, and if you want to do it, it's voluntary. But at the same time, I try to actually discourage people from doing it, but it's built such a sense of ownership into the company that people want to dive into it even further. It's also going to give you that common set of tools across all departments. And I look at it as the more people you have on it, the more fun you can specifically have, because you've got a lot of extra stuff out there. So, and there's another question from Jenny about how easy is it to obtain for FOIA requests from the cloud. So, depending on how you have your implementation, it can be as easy as you would like. For this thing, the coolest thing is that you can actually integrate it in with as much stuff as you want. So if for some reason this isn't integrated and doesn't have an integration right off the bat, you can actually develop something that will integrate with that. So for FOIA, I don't believe right off the bat there's an integration for it, but the cool, and I guess the cool and the pretty awesome thing that this new set of tools have is they're open source for the most part, and they allow you to develop a functionality that in the past, when you have email, that's all you have, and you have to go find a plugin, and if that plugin doesn't exist, you're pretty much out of luck. Whereas with this type of tool set, it integrates extremely well with everything. We've personally built specific integrations with our own systems that didn't exist for the tool, and now we have notifications about severity, server outages, things that are going bad, and they're all coming through. And then essentially it's going to help, you know, everybody participate a little bit better, and you're going to achieve your common purpose that we're going for, which is essentially more collaboration and having that cohesive environment, and trying to get rid of the million tools that you may be working with on a day-to-day basis and get you down to one common tool set that everybody's using, and then everything integrates with that. So you can set things up even as easy as an email address for a specific channel in your Slack, and when you email that email address, it will actually post an announcement in the announcements channel, or it'll send a direct email to you. So people on the outside don't always have to use the tools, but if you give them a pipeline to use them on the inside, then when they send emails and so forth, they're going to come right into your environment. We talked about earlier about people wanting to invite the community into Slack or into these types of tools. I highly encourage getting as many people as you can into the environment. You would want to be organized, and we've got a section in a minute about how to keep it organized. But when you want to start inviting people, I say open the floodgates. Start either sending out invitations directly to your patrons based on their email address. They'll need an email address to be able to log into this tool, and then move forward from there. Make sure that you've essentially got your internal teams utilizing this tool set, and then you want to keep building upon it. So there's all the channels that we talked about. You want to create channels that are relevant for your team, but also create a set of channels that are relevant for your community that you're servicing. I typically like to have a general channel and an announcements channel, and I utilize an alerts channel as well. And then we also have some channels that are just off the wall, and specifically like a random channel where we basically have a channel that's dedicated for blowing off steam. The steam in I guess a business appropriate way, or more appropriate, but just something for, putting pictures. Typically you get those funny pictures that you send through emails and things like that. You can dedicate a channel for that, and I keep it almost no holds barred for the most part, just so people have an area where they can just go hang out and have fun. We install integrations that all departments can use. You want to leverage those integrations, all those tools that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation. I would say about 75 to 80% of those tools all have some sort of integration that you can connect to Slack or one of these other cloud-based tools. You'll also notice that when you go to select one of these tools, and I kind of harp on Slack because they have the biggest catalog of integrations available, but there are some that are out there. They're cheaper. They're free in terms of unlimited access, but they have a very small tool set they integrate with. And then, like we talked about, extend your offers out to your patrons, your vendors, and then give them access to certain areas. You can manage your environment a little bit easier by grouping those people into a specific group. So I can take all my library and my community and put that into one group called community, and then be able to give that community group access to various channels. At the same time, I can do that with the employees of the library as well. So, additional benefits. It's going to increase your departmental transparency. People are going to be able to see what's going on between, but at the same time, you can designate channels for the community to be able to be more transparent with them about activities and so forth. It's going to help improve your culture within your library in terms of just having a more fun, more upbeat culture technology-wise, leveraging technology for a little bit of fun, but also a lot more collaboration. And from what we've seen as we've implemented this, and we're on our 3rd year of using this tool set. We jumped on Slack when it first came out, and because of all the adoption of it, we've got an environment that's typically plagued with 50% employee retention, and we run at about 90 to 95% employee retention, and part of that is truly because of the integration of Slack and being able to focus more effort towards it. We're going to make information a lot more easier to use. It's a lot of searching and so forth, and being able to access all that archive communication. And if I pause for a second, I see a question from Nicole that if the library has Office 365, SharePoint makes it easier to compile FOIA request responses. You can do that. And at the same time, if you want, you can integrate that with Slack so you get those notifications so you can prepare them even quicker. It isn't legal for people to work off the clock, so does this have tool to track time/usage? You can. There's logging mechanisms. So if you want to log things, or put more of a mentality in place that says, you know, only work on it during the clock, you can do that. We've embraced it in a different manner where people can check in at any given time. And I guess that specific rule typically applies to how compensation is against hourly employees. If you have salary, I mean, obviously it's a wash, but in my hourly environment, we still open it up to be able to allow people to join in. So it's all based on how you can put your rules in place. At the same time, Diane, you can actually put restrictions for specific users and say they can only log in at any given at specific times during the day. So we also have our integrations. Various integrations you've got is really just making sure that all those various applications we use on a day-to-day basis are really going to be able to allow us to tap into the various systems. Very similar to what Nicole said, where they're using Office 365 and SharePoint. You have a Microsoft Office implementation, which is kind of the standard sale package that Microsoft gives you. And with that, you have the ability to integrate back into these to start getting notifications and making that a little more productive. So if you have a mechanism already in place, you can, with SharePoint you can code a lot of extra things, but even Microsoft is moving away from kind of how they've leveraged SharePoint in the past, realizing that the implementation isn't being widely used as it should have been, and Microsoft is actually going with Microsoft Teams that's going to have a direct integration with Office 365 and SharePoint. So Nicole, one of the things that I would focus on, given that you already have a Microsoft implementation, because of that package that you probably have for your location, you can actually use Microsoft Teams 100% for free because of the environment that you're already in. So for those people that maybe already have a Microsoft agreement in place with Office and you're using Office 365 and other Microsoft products, typically in that agreement as Microsoft Teams is released, Microsoft has stated that because you're on that agreement, you get Teams for free. So it's a good alternative. I would say when I have that option, that's the alternative that you should take, because you're going to get all the benefits of kind of a paid version of, let's say, Slack, but it's going to be totally free, and it's going to integrate even better with your Microsoft applications. So if I kick back, the few things that you want to do, and we talked about how to choose what apps to integrate, and it's really based on the communication platform that you're selecting. So for Microsoft Teams, you're going to probably use Microsoft Applications because more than likely that's what you've already got in place. For those people that are using Google Docs or maybe even more of an open source route, you can use Slack or some of these others because they fall towards the more open source route. We talked about those that share files easier. So if you have a Google Drive or a Box account or a Dropbox account, you can leverage those with these. So when you share a file in Google Drive, it'll automatically post a copy of that file up to your communication method, and you can designate it. It's not that every file that you share is going to get reshared out to everybody. Just keep an eye on how you set that up. So when you go into Slack, there's an option to manage your teams, and when you manage your teams, it's going to allow you to add integrations, and then it'll step you through the process of how to configure everything. And the biggest thing that I've seen is when I took over the environment that I'm currently directing right now, is having multiple systems is, in all reality, pretty difficult to manage, especially if you're talking about 20, 30 different systems that you have to know on a day-to-day basis. If you really are only working with like 2 applications, I'm only using Office and I'm only using SharePoint, then more than likely that's going to be easy to manage. There's not a need to try to mesh those too much further together unless you just see a benefit to that. But if you start to see that you're using Office, Dropbox, I'm using my email, I use this for chat, and I use this for managing my projects, and I use this for managing surveys and other communication methods. Bringing those down into one tool that you leverage on a day-to-day basis has a huge impact on productivity, as well as a huge impact on increasing your abilities to be able to focus more effort towards that tool set. Like I said, there's tons of apps. We've talked about a lot of these and showed them a lot of them on the screen, but two apps for specifically to Slack. You've got individual bots, and these bots actually just sit out on your integration and will answer questions. So one of the things that we have integrated in our instance of Slack is if you happen to ask, a question, let's say how to clear your cache and cookies on your internet browser, instead of me being there to be able to answer that question, the bot itself will automatically answer it for you and give you the next best step to do this. So lots of little cool things that you can implement. You can implement your HR management and various other tools. So when you implement a tool set such as this, it's really great to dive into it a little further and find out all the different options that are available. In all reality, you'll find as you implement, you're probably going to go a little on the crazy side and install a ton of different plugins, a ton of different bots. It's okay to do that because you've got to play with them a little bit to figure out if you're going to use them or benefit from them. If you don't benefit from them, it's easy enough to go back into where you installed them from and uninstall them. Luckily, the way they've built things, it works just like your cell phone in terms of being able to uninstall and reinstall apps. So the different types of bots we've used, we've got bots that give kudos and automate them to the team. So if there's a great survey that comes through and a customer's extremely happy or a patron is extremely happy, it can catch that if it comes through on an email and send it back out to the team through the Slack channel and congratulate that individual and give them a little bit of a kudos. You can share your knowledge. I like to call it as put your knowledge sharing on blast. So when you have a new wiki article or a new process that you've put in place, you can send that out and communicate it out and get everybody's attention on a almost immediate basis. Yeah, yep. In terms of we'll be able to, I'll send out a copy of the PowerPoint that you'll be able to print. There's a lot of ability to build your custom interfaces. We also talked about that a little earlier. And then a bunch of different options, and we kind of covered a lot of these through various conversations earlier. So just reaffirmation that there's not only just a central communication point, but there's a ton of different areas that you can focus on. The last thing is we're going to have a little bit of a, I guess, information overload, or we have it right now. When you throw in a new system, you want to be able to figure out how to communicate it, make sure it's all organized. So you want to focus on making sure that your messages hit the appropriate areas. So if you focus on public threads, private threads by the team and so forth, you're going to be able to do that. And make sure when you think about where to post the message, make sure it's a relevant method of being able to post it in that area. So if you think this is general consumption, send it to a public thread. And if you're looking to implement this with your community, think of it as does it go to my public thread that's focused on my community, or is it a public thread that's focused on the library? And then break out your communication in that manner. You want to try to keep all your person-to-person communications still in the same platform. It's going to benefit you later on in life. Think of it as your CRM system or your customer relationship management database, where now you have your customer relationship management database for your internal team, so you can keep your communications back on track and be able to organize them. You're going to continue to leverage all those cloud tools that we talked about earlier. And, I like to try to leave this as leverage it as a solution as your primary or your only means of communication. When we implemented it, we had a hard time at first getting people on. And we decided to spend most of our time sending the communication only to Slack. And then you have people that are missing out on some items. and we referenced it as you should have looked in the Slack. We still have one straggler here and there that forget to log into Slack, but because of that, because they're wanting to get more buy-in, the team has all installed Slack. We made it mandatory across the entire team to have this installed, and then we see other teams that want to participate as well. So we talked about naming conventions. Make sure when you're building a naming convention that it makes sense. You have a little bit of room. I wouldn't make your name for each channel like a sentence long. Try to keep it concise and make sure it is relevant to what's going on in that channel. We've had times in my own experience where we've misnamed a channel and we didn't give it more of an appropriate descriptive name, and the content, it never got used. So we'd end up deleting the channel and recreating it as something else. We talked about how we can reference channels by the hashtag and individuals and groups by @ so all of that still works within this. You want to make sure that you have kind of a little bit of a committee at some point to review and agree on your integrations, because you don't want to put too many integrations in the system because you can get a little overloaded with the content. Learn how to use your integrated search. It works very similar to Google. And then set up some etiquette guidelines. They're very easy to establish, and just make sure that people are leveraging those types of guidelines. Once you get that established, that organization 101, then you want to kind of dive in a little bit further and start removing channels that people aren't using. Even if you're not using a channel and you don't have any relevancy with that, I personally recommend it so you can get it off your feed. You want to archive channels that people aren't using just in general, just delete them off the system. And then you want to adjust your notifications. So on specific channels, we have an alert channel. I make sure that anything that goes through that alert channel is notifying me. I also have a management channel. And anybody on my management team that has an issue that posts to that management channel, it notifies my phone so I can address it in a more immediate manner. You've got your private and public channels. We've kind of chatted about that. We talked about deleting. I would try to make sure that people aren't using channels as a dumping ground. Make a channel specific for that. If you have one that just for random stuff, make a random channel, and that's specifically what I called ours, and people just throw in just random anything in that channel. And then make sure you open a channel to the public. We talked about that multiple times throughout this presentation, is making sure that you've integrated it with your community. So you want to know how to get people on board. If we pose this question really quick, is have you gotten people on board in the past with various pieces of change? You can post it into the questions section, and as you do that, I'll kind of dive into what we've done as best practices. So for what you can possibly do is you can start a library-wide initiative and also have some sort of training on the usage of tools. So we started pushing this in our environment to be able to have multiple people come out and work in the environment, test it out, and then also started training people on how to use the tool set. You've got to be slow and steady. You can go full blast at it, but you may not give people the appropriate level of attention they may require to be able to adopt it. So we adopted a kind of a slow and steady pace, and I don't mean slow and 2 years later we got everybody on, but I would say slow and in a month or two start to have people on. Be persistent, and then also have new tools that typically bring better features, so there's going to be a lot of updates, so make sure that we communicate what those are. And then we adopt a methodology with out with the old and in with the new. Have kind of like a tossing out the email party, print out some emails and burn them up. And then the last proof case, integrations are going to be key to making sure your implementation is successful. You've got to be able to put some sort of meaning behind it. You may want to build more integrations for yourself if you don't have any if you don't have something that integrates cohesively with the implementation. Make sure you leverage the email to channel. I use that to try to break my habit of actually sending out emails. I'll send the email to the channel and then eventually start to get out of the email habit. continue to pull just things in general, people, tools, applications, anything that you might be able to pull into that main communication channel, bring it in there. And then obviously you're going to need to leverage various integrations, applications, and so forth that will help out. But at the same time, don't feel you're limited by the app list that you go to, because you do have the ability to integrate a ton of other things into the system. So if I kind of say, hey, what's next? I'll open it up to questions. We have a few minutes to kind of give some questions and kind of cover everything. If you have any questions, feel free to use this moment right now.
Hi, Justin. It's Louise. Thanks so much for your presentation. I appreciate it. It was interesting to hear about all those different tools and how they can be used. While we're waiting to see if anyone has questions, I wanted to go back to the FOIA or FOIA request real quick. You know, public libraries and some other organizations have to be concerned about that. That's the Freedom of Information Act request. And so if somebody, you know, requests information, you know, we have to be able to access that and maybe download it into a shareable form, you know. And so I guess what I'm kind of assuming from the questions, like if you're using Slack or other things that might be subject to a FOIA request, is it really easy to be able to print things out and download them so that we can give them to other people if requested?
Yeah, you can, it works very similar to like if you're using Microsoft Word or something like that. So if you get that type of request in, depending on how you're receiving those requests now, you can actually filter those requests directly into Slack. And then you have the ability to reply to those requests straight out of Slack, and it will basically export your reply and send it right back to them. So if they happen to email that to you, you can hit the reply button from Slack, fill out whatever you need, and it'll automatically send that back to their email address. If it's more of a web form, and depending on how that web form works, you can integrate it in a manner. So I guess it depends on how you are currently receiving your Freedom of Information Act requests, and then you can build some level of integration or utilize one that's already there to be able to reply back with that information.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm just going to try and give an example maybe. So let's say a library is doing some renovations. And I mean, obviously the library is going to have some standard email communication about that, but maybe they decide to use Slack as a way to communicate internally about the project.
Okay.
So then if somebody comes and says, you know, I would like to see all your email communication about the renovations, you know, I think we can easily visualize how that will work with our standard email software, but how does that work with Slack? Can we print
Slack,
out those communications?
You can. It basically gives you a searchable history, so you can do it a couple different ways. If you wanted to do the hunt and peck way and just go through, you can do that. With Slack, you can keep it even more organized because you can dedicate a channel for that type of communication, and let's say create a renovation channel. And all the communication about renovation can occur in that renovation channel. So now you've compartmentalized all that communication that anybody may want to report on and be able to export that with either a copy and paste, or you can use an export function within Slack and export that all out for someone else. You can either print it, email it, in any other way you may want to. So it gives you a slightly better, because I know if we do emails right now, if you do that through emails and I go, hey, I want to see all your emails about this specific topic,
right,
you're going to find yourself searching for emails, trying to find out what word someone may have used. Typically, I'd search my email with the word renovation, but if, let's say, someone didn't use the word renovation and they said remodeling, now I'm going to have to search my emails that way. But with Slack, you have the ability to just compartmentalize all communication into a renovation channel, so then you don't have to search, you just go straight to that channel and export it.
Right, gotcha, that's helpful. And I think, I know we've kind of come up to 3 o'clock, but I think 2 more questions just came in, if we can address those real quick.
So Diane said, can any of these companies safeguard patron privacy the way we can when information is stored on the site? So Diane, I know specifically because we had to do this for the college, because we talk about I support colleges and universities and all the companies and various people's information that occurs on those sites. So specifically for Slack, they leverage the Amazon Web Services systems to house everything, which is a extremely high security level, and all of these others. I don't have the specific the certifications they have, but in a quick short answer, yes, I know specifically for Slack, they have probably the highest possible security that can be had, and that is because Slack specifically chose to host their cloud environment on Amazon Web Services. At the same time, if there is, I guess you can say, a little doubt still, or if angst, you can still find a different tool set that allow you to host it on your own servers. But in my experience, your servers are only as good as the people that are managing them, and if you believe that those people are going to be better than Amazon in their security environment and being able to keep it secure, then I would say host it internally. If you have, if and I say that because there's people that make on the server team over $1 million a year that are on the Amazon team, and they know everything. So just a couple options, but yes, I vetted it out internally on my own because we had to go through the same process because of all the various regulations around schools. And I mean, it is 100% secure, but you know, there are other alternatives that you can install locally on your own servers. And Alan had a question of, do you have any recommendations for keeping Slack within the free version limits? That's an awesome question because I thought I could. If you don't have a ton of communication going on a daily basis, then you should be okay. The real issues with the free version is you have a 10,000 message limit across the entire system. So once you start to go to 10,001, that first message that ever occurred on the system will get automatically archived, and you won't be able to access it. And then after you start incrementing, obviously those messages start to roll off. That will be one of the pain points. We actually were able to do that for quite a while and let a bunch of them roll off, but we did get to a point as the I guess the criticality of what we do required us to move to a paid version. The only other piece that we found that was limiting us was the amount of integrations. When you are on the free version, your integrations are somewhere around 7, maybe 10 tops. I believe the number was at 7 when we used it. So we had to find the best 7 integrations that we wanted to use, which we were able to do that with no problem. It didn't become much of an issue. But there was a couple integrations that we really needed that we ended up having to go to the paid version. If that becomes a problem, you can say, hey, I got to this, Slack was awesome, but we were hitting the limits of the free version, and I would really like to go to, let's say Glip was another one I talked about. Glip has no limit on their free version for the amount of communication, and they have a no limit on their integrations, but they don't have as many integrations as Slack. And we found that we could go to that one, and the cool thing is to add on top of that is that all I had to do is go into Slack, hit export, and it would export those 10,000 communications that it did save and allow me to import it, and it automatically rebuilt my environment in Glip for the most part. I had to reset up some integrations, but it recreated my channels and it re-imported all those messages. So I didn't lose anything when I made that decision, but we ultimately went to Slack, we jumped over to Glip for a little bit, but then we found out there was a couple things that we had already made that was custom to Slack, and we had a little bit harder time moving them to Glip, so we ended up switching back and going with a paid version of Slack. In terms of cost for what we spend, I think it's about $3,000 a year for cost for licensing for Slack. And I believe they have some ability, depending on for not-for-profit and depending on, you know, various other structures, you can get discounted rates as well. But hopefully that helps you out.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Justin, for your time today and for the presentation. Like I said, it was interesting to hear about the different tools. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. As I said, we recorded today. I'll post this on the Rails website with the slides in just a few days. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, Justin. Have a good day.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
Okay, bye-bye.